It's time for the Roots and Roots Show with your host, Greg Rashid, bringing you history and music from the Black American diaspora. Greg and his guests' goal is to root the show's information in your psyche, providing you the roots to expand knowledge within your community. Now here's your host, Greg Rashid.
Well, I want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evening to everyone out there listening wherever you are in the world. This is Greg Rashid with another edition of the Root and Roots program. Heard from many people at their convenience online on various platforms, but a lot of people listen every Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. Mountain Time on KUHSdenver.com, created by the one and only, the legendary Henry Archuleta. And I want to say hi to all my friends in the Colorado region. Hope to get back there sometime in the near future. But I'm going to get, rather than doing my regular platter, just going on and on before I get into the show, I'm just going to get the interview going right now as I interview a very good friend of mine, Dr. Clarence Lussan, who's the professor, director of the International Affairs program at Howard University, and just a longtime activist, historian, researcher, internationally known. And we're going to be talking about today the midterms. So right now we're going to turn it over to the interview, and we'll see you after the end of the interview. So let's get to it right now on the Root and Roots Show. And I am so honored today to have on my show you could do a whole series on just everything that this gentleman has done over the years and is currently doing. And I'm just honored to have him on. Also honored to have him as a friend, that I've known him for a long time, and we only keep running into each other either on the internet or in our travels. Last time I actually saw him I went to Vietnam to see him. And as you know, everyone, I'm in Thailand right now. But I'm talking about the associate professor at Howard University, director of the International Affairs program at Howard University, author, philosopher, lecturer, just everything, director of so many things, and just a legend in not so much African American history, but just American history. And you really have to, if you don't know Dr. Clarence Lussan, you better find out about him soon and get some of his books, in particular the last book, the book that I have right here, the Black History of the White House. And you should have that in your library. And even if you don't have a library, if you have one book to get this book. But I am so honored just to have Clarence on. Are you there, Clarence?
I am here.
Man,
thank you for having me.
Oh, thank you for coming on. And we got to do this more often, because last time you were on my program was talking about when this book came out over 10 years ago. So
Now you forgot to mention that we work together.
Well, that too. I want to bring that. That's a whole story. Because
right.
And it's about friendships. I mean, friendships last a lifetime.
Sure. Sure.
We met in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Oh, yeah. You're right.
Yeah, because it was at the Physicians for Social Responsibility.
Right.
Story in itself. And we could do a whole story about that organization, our experience there as Black men. But that's another story there.
There's another story there.
Yeah, that's a whole different thing there. But yeah, we're talking about, friendships last a lifetime. And, we've only actually seen each other, besides on, Zoom now, only once in that time in person. That was, like I said, in Vietnam. But today I have him on to talk about the midterms that are going on in America now. And Clarence, as I said off camera before we started, I mean, this is like, from what I see over here in Thailand, this might be the most profound, but also the most dangerous midterm election that the U.S. has experienced in ages. Am I right in that or wrong?
No, you're absolutely right. So if you can imagine how it looks from the outside, imagine how it looks from the inside.
Oh man.
So it's a pretty scary moment. You know, we're basically at a crossroads, and you hear a lot of talk about democracy being on the ballot, but I think it's really authoritarianism is on the ballot.
Yes.
And I draw a distinction because we've had lots of elections, and there were people on the ballot that we didn't like, and they had different politics than us. But we didn't necessarily think that they were authoritarians. But we have a clear category of folks now, of the majority of Republicans who are running, who have blatantly said that they will implement policies that are boldly undemocratic, that they're not going to accept losing elections. They're going to basically rig the election if they can get away with it. So it's a really kind of dangerous moment for the country.
I mean, really, I mean, to hear that, to hear you say that, it gives me a chill. And some of the commentaries I see, in the interviews I see, with because I look at I want to look at both sides. I ain't no
Right.
MAGA supporter or anything like the Republican on one hand, but I like to see what they're saying, and it's scary. It's unlike and I have to go back. It's funny because I've been reading a book on the Great Society, Lyndon Johnson, that whole
Mm-hmm.
period, the civil rights movement, and in many cases, to me, this actually seems even scarier than that moment prior to the passing of the Civil Rights Bill. Eh,
Right.
do you see that?
Well, I do see that. What strikes me is what's pretty unique is that there's a marriage of the extreme right in this country and its ability to mainstream itself in one of the political parties, along with the political aggression of many of the nation's billionaires.
Right.
And that is a toxic mix. And so, what we're seeing in this election is the fruit of Supreme Court decisions like uh, Citizens United. That was a decision a decade or so ago that essentially said there could be as much money spent in elections as available,
Right.
and it radically changed who will be in elections. Individuals who could not on their own, not on their own policies or their own personalities, raise a dime, basically get adopted by individual millionaires and billionaires and these PACs, these political action committees that have basically no limits and not a lot of scrutiny. And so that's injected into the political mainstream these individuals who would not have had a chance at getting elected probably even 10 years ago, maybe even not 5 years ago.
Yeah.
But they are they're in the contest now,
A-
and whatever comes out of the election next week, that's not going to be the end of it.
And that's the scary thing. When you said that point right there, it's not whoever wins or loses, it's just gonna be bad. I can't see anything a light. And maybe you see a
Yeah,
light and hope, but I don't. Yeah, elaborate
no,
on that.
no, I think people are mobilized. There's a lot of energy, but this is on kind of both sides, and there's a big question of when how many of uh, some of these candidates who are going to lose are going to accept losing, and if they don't, what will they advocate for their supporters? There's a very big concern about political violence in the elections, not just this year where we've seen incidents. Most recently, the attack on Nancy Pelosi's husband,
Yeah.
and then we saw January 6th. But before that, around that, and after that, there have been many other incidents, and there has not been a lot of accountability. So the sense that I can get away with this is very much kind of prevalent. And so, a lot of us are really, really concerned that, we're, coming out of this when the smoke clears, some of these individuals will get elected. They will be in the House of Representatives. They will be in the U.S. Senate. They will be in governor's mansions. They will be in Secretary of State positions. They will be in Attorney General positions. They will be in state houses, in Senate
Right.
houses. It's what's I talked to a lot of other political scientists, and we're all amazed because although this is sort of our gig that we focus on elections, none of us can remember ever where from top to bottom we were looking at elections from governors down to school boards,
Right.
because you've got a element now that is extremely abnormal and dangerous at every single level. And none of this is so some of it is individual initiatives, but a lot of it is also coordinated, planned, and intentional. And it's coming from very conscious, organized forces out there with a lot of resources.
That's the thing. A lot of money, a lot of resources. Now, you mentioned earlier the PACs that out, the political facts. Could you tell my listeners this whole thing I've seen, being over here, I have noticed that the Democratic Party, some of their super PACs are paying to have what they consider like an awful Republican candidate run against their Democratic candidate. I.e., I'm thinking about in Michigan, there's a guy, I think John Gibbs, who's a Republican,
Right.
and he's been paid
He's
by
a,
the
a black
Democrats.
Republican that was
Yeah,
with in the Trump administration.
right.
Right.
And he's been paid by a super PAC by the Democrats to
Yeah.
run. I
So
don't.
th-
What's
this
going on?
so this is very controversial. I think there's been a hesitancy to fight about it too much in the public because of just kind of furthers some of the divisions. But there's a boiling anger at resources being put on this ludicrous plan that if you get the most extreme Republican to win in the primaries, then that person will be easily defeated by a more moderate, rational Democrat in the fall. And there is no basis for thinking that will happen. And what it does is you open the door for these characters who would have probably lost in the primary to actually win
Right.
overall. And the resources that you put into that means you're not putting it into the races where Democrats are in trouble, and lots of trouble. So that strategy is, going to come back to bite the Democrats. Now it wasn't all Democrats, and there was voices against it, but some of those PACs and some of the folks who had resources and who basically decided on their own, that they were going to go down that road. I think it's been a horrible mistake.
Oh, it is. And I remember years ago, while you moved over here, there was a candidate running for the House, I think, in South Carolina that the Republican Party they paid for him. I think his name was Alan Green. And he was black.
Okay. I think I know who you're talking about.
And
Right.
his whole
Right.
thing, he never, when he was interviewed, he would always talk about he was gonna make a bunch of uh little cartoons about him being a
Right.
superhero, and he had no agenda, he had nothing,
So I
and it
think
was
this was the dude who had like the same name as somebody, and so they were going
yeah,
to use
yeah,
that to
that's him. Yeah, and a
confuse the
lot,
voters. Yeah, it was just a ridiculous. Yeah, it was a ridiculous shenanigan.
but it
Yeah,
seems
I
like
remember that.
that was the same tactic that's being used now by some of the Democratic super PACs, and it's gonna like
Except I don't think they spent millions on that guy.
Well, you didn't
And
have to
then
then.
he lost like tremendously too,
Right,
right?
right. Oh yeah.
But it's this strategy really kind of underestimate the fragile moment that we're in, and that the Republicans have decided, and this is broadly spread, that they want control of the House and control of the U.S. Senate, and they will vote for any Republican name on the ballot. And
Herschel
it
Walker.
doesn't
I'm
matter.
sorry.
Herschel Walker is the poster boy for this.
Oh,
I remember one of they interviewed after the of the zillion scandals, the one around him and abortion, and him basically pushing one, two, and maybe more uh girlfriends to get abortions. They interviewed one of his supporters, and she said, which I think really characterizes where they're at. She didn't care if Herschel Walker did the abortion himself.
oh
She was
God.
voting for him, and I think that's the posture they have. That this is it. Warnock is not an option. Not voting right. That's not an option. If we're gonna have control of the Senate, we got to get these seats. Herschel Walker is a crazed and insane and completely unqualified person, but it don't matter.
But on the other hand,
And
yeah,
that's,
on the other
that's where
hand,
they're at.
Clarence, you got these same MAGA and their MAGA folks who are so supposed to be so Christian, so bring back the Bible, put it in everything, and and then that's
Yep.
supporting Warnock, who is a minister.
Minister.
The
Right.
legacy
Right.
of Dr. King is with Warnock. I mean, it's this whole
Right.
history he has, but you would rather support this, the seriously idle, sick man in Herschel Walker and don't care what he's done. And I guess that gets
Right.
to the whole the thing, we gotta talk about Trump, what he said that, years ago that he could shoot someone was it in front, in Times Square and he would still win. He could do
Yeah,
anything.
and he probably has done something along those lines.
Oh, sure, a
But
number of times.
you raised another you raised a really really important point that I think is getting more attention now. So there's been sort of this focus on this white supremacy, white nationalist element in the Republican Party, and how that's playing out. But
Right.
there's also a Christian nationalist element, and in many parts, a white Christian nationalism. So I think some of the black support for MAGA comes through that, but there's a whole line of it that is straight up white Christianity, and basically we're willing to do whatever we can to basically push this theocracy that they're trying to create, and they're looking at it from the perspective of the White House, the perspective of Congress, and the perspective of the Supreme Court. And that if we capture those three and we hold them long enough, we basically will build a theocracy.
Right. That's looks like that's what's happening now. And by the way, listeners, I'm talking to the amazing, the one and only Dr. Clarence Busan, and we're just talking about the midterms. And we wish you could get, I wish I had call-ins on this show in particular because this would be very important. But Clarence, I'm wondering too, with I look at from afar. I'm looking at this from afar, and I'm wondering. I talk to friends, overseas in America, and a lot of people tell me, "Well, I'm not. One thing, I'm not going. I'll vote, but I'm not going to vote for." I look at the ballot. I see the judges down there. I don't know who these judges are, but I'm not voting for them.
Right.
That's a huge mistake. And talk a little more about that because that's a key thing.
But it's been one in which again I would somewhat indict my own profession, political scientist, but certainly many of the national political operatives simply kind of dismiss these local elections, and somewhat understandable, but we're in a time where from A to Z in elections, we're fighting on the terrain of whether or not the nation will continue to try to be more and more democratic, or it's going to start surrendering political rights, civil rights, human rights to these extremists. So that means we got to focus on these elected judges. We got to
Yeah,
focus on these school boards. We got to focus on these city councils because the other side is doing it.
they're
And
definitely
they
doing
have incorporated into their strategies. We're winning every office in every, not only elected office, but every administrative position we can get. And again, we hadn't focused on, people who administer elections, who some of whom aren't elected. Some are paid positions, some are voluntary positions. These are people who, if there's malice, they can have a very, very harsh impact on a particular election.
it. Yeah,
So now we've got to focus on all of that, as you point out. There's, we can't just say, that's not important anymore. We don't know the person who coming in there is some QAnon, pro MAGA, uh, fanatic.
yeah, that's the thing. And I want to tell my listeners too that don't assume that well, MAGA's is over there in U.S. that we have to deal with it. Over here in Thailand, I have seen folks walk around with MAGA hats for a number
Really?
of years. Oh yeah, oh yes indeed. I've seen that. I've
I
posted it on my Facebook site. I've talked about it on the show, but I've also seen Confederate flags over
right,
here.
right,
But
right.
yeah, you'll see guys walking
But
around
you,
here.
but you're right. You're right. It's a global phenomena. Uh, it's global. The MAGA part is global in that there are supporters of the MAGA movement around the world, but this right wing populism is also global.
Yeah,
And we just saw a big defeat in Brazil for Bolsonaro,
yes,
who's going down that road. But it's a battle.
it's a huge battle. Getting back to the midterms in particular, what do you say? Looking at our community, in particular, Black community, what can we do besides vote? What else can we do, no matter what happens? What should we start doing?
So I think there are a couple of things because I think this really is an important question. So one, we really have to stay informed. Uh, some of us, you and I, we kind of live this stuff, so we pay like a lot of
Right.
attention. But
Yeah,
most people
we're
don't.
weird. We're strange, but
We're just kind of out there on the nerd board.
that's
Uh,
right.
but but people have to increase their awareness of who's in position to have impact on your life. And that's elected officials, that's appointed officials, it's public policy. And I don't advocate people spending all their time studying this, but you've got to pay attention, because uh there's you can't just delegate,
Right.
which is often kind of what happens. I'm going to elect somebody. They sound like a good person. I know they're working hard. And even if that's true, they still need your support in other ways. Whether it's fundraising, whether it's holding campaign events, whether it's sending them information about issues in your community. There are multiple different ways to really kind of stay engaged. And this is a battle for the long haul. Again, whatever happens next Tuesday, that's not going to be the end of the political crisis that we're in.
Right.
It will clarify it in some ways that either there's some degree of pushing it back or it's on a runaway train. But in any case, comes November 9th, 10th, 11th, and going forward, these elements are still going to be here that we have to deal with.
Definitely. That's the definite thing. Now, some folks, what do you say to folks who say, well, I was hoping that the members of the squad, in particular AOC, folks like that would really help us, but it seems like they have like given up. And I've heard that a lot. Now, in some things, I have to say honestly, Clarence, I've seen with some of the members of the squad, and I have to say too, with Bernie Sanders and some folks like that, it's
Right.
like there's a resignation. Maybe I'm totally wrong because I'm looking at it from afar. But do you see that?
Well, it's complicated. Uh, so they principally tried to operate through the Progressive Caucus,
Right,
which is like the largest caucus on the Hill. And the Progressive Caucus distinguishes itself from kind of the moderate and establishment wing of the Democrats, but overall is not as far left as AOC and Talib and a couple of the others. And so there were constraints on institutionally and politically on what they could actually do.
right,
And a lot of pressure because also with the thin margin in the House uh, in terms of numbers. And on the Senate side, it was a virtual tie that was basically broken by Vice President Harris.
right,
There's not a lot of room to kind of go off the ranch. And in the Senate with Sinema and Manchin, it was just a day-to-day battle just to keep them in the ballpark, right? So there was, just kind of no room for, uh, no latitude really
right.
politically if Democrats will get anything accomplished. And amazingly, they were able to get some things through, but they couldn't get through electoral reform. They couldn't get through the police reform. There were things that just they could not get around either within the uh, party itself or the solid block of resistance by the Republicans, which on the Senate side mean filibuster.
Right.
So there was some constraints on the squad. I think they probably could have been better at messaging and more consistent. Uh, because I think like you, a lot of folks were, what are they up to, and what,
Yeah.
what's
As I
their
look at it, it's
kind
like
of,
that's what I thought it was going to
position on these
be.
things,
Yeah.
right?
Which brings
They
us
may have
something.
thought that too.
Yeah, I think so. Now, I hear this and I actually was thinking about sending some money, but I've been very hesitant after I've seen some things. But I know there was a movement a year ago for a new progressive party. And it kind of seems like it's fizzling because I know Nina Turner was a part of it. There's a lot of folks that,
Right,
were a part of it. And I know it's kind of
right.
like fizzle. Do you think, being a political science, professor and knowing this stuff for many, many years, do you think that a third party that would be progressive can work in America? Can it work? Will it ever happen? What will it take?
Uh, so I think it's possible, and there've been periods where there were more than two parties. Most of those were kind of short lived. But there've been and at the national level there've been times, but the obstacles are harsh,
Right,
and it means changing not only federal laws but state laws. And so it would really probably require a major rupture in one of the two parties. And what's happened mostly has been uh, that different wings of the parties have basically sort of succumbed. Now, what's interesting with the Republican Party is the MAGA wing is basically kind of taken over.
right,
There's no real contest from any moderates that I can see. You got, Mitt Romney who's basically out there on the island. And beyond that, I just don't see, even five
Yeah.
vocal
No,
Republicans. It's just not there.
you
And
know, the
so,
MAGAs can say anything, and McConnell and all these
right,
clowns, they just go along with
they just kind of go
it. And
because
do you think
there's
this?
a.
Uh-huh. Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead.
No, I was
Oh, I was
wondering
just gonna
now.
say, I think there's the confluence of interests. So
Right.
McConnell may hate Trump, and Trump may hate McConnell, and I think they probably really detest each other. But they've got agendas that overlap.
Yeah.
And if one could get rid of the other, they would do it without a second hesitation. But they can't. Trump needs McConnell, because McConnell, controls the Senate like a king when he's in charge, and then uh, McConnell basically has recognized that the base of the party is a MAGA base, and they're not getting anybody elected unless in this juncture unless they go through Trump. So they need each other. Uh, but McConnell and others, they're not breaking off.
No.
And so they basically are kind of stuck there.
Yeah, that's
But
it.
what were you gonna say?
No, the thing is that we talk about the MAGA base, but didn't this? Because I remember covering this. I went to a convention. God, what was it? 2008 in actually in Lakewood, Colorado. I was living in
Okay.
Denver. I did it for the radio station I was at that time. I went to a Tea Party convention, and
Oh,
did
okay.
now did the Tea Party, the Tea Party, did they, a lot of people say, well, Trump started all this, but I think about the Tea Party and what they did because they
Right,
became their own party. I remember there were
right,
elections going on locally in Colorado at that time when I went to that convention. And folks that were the McConnells and Marco Rubio types of the state that were Republicans were bowing
right,
to the Tea Party folks, to
right,
the money people. I saw that. I witnessed that and saw
right.
how they did that. And the Tea
No, you're
Party folks,
absolutely right.
yeah. And it started the whole, and I think that's starting. People forget about that Tea Party because they created their own party out of the Republican Party. And
So
I think,
that's a
mhm,
very intriguing question. Why didn't the Tea Party evolve into a full functioning third party?
right,
And my gut is uh the mainstream of the party made accommodations, and the leadership, the Tea Party was a very diffused movement, so there wasn't like three leaders. So it probably was easier to co-opt, if you will.
right.
Uh, but I think you're right. That that probably was an opportunity, at least on the right side, for a third party to grow and develop. Um, on the left side, on the Democratic Party side, and on the progressive side, uh, it's just not there. The elements you think would be the core of a third party, labor unions, progressive groups, civil rights, or progressive civil rights organizations, progressive women's organizations, uh, pretty much are not talking third party.
No, no, they're not. And it's very unfortunate, but they're not. And also the thing too, there's no, because we have talked about a number of times in this conversation, the money aspect as far as on the progressive side. There's no,
Right.
Koch brothers. There's nothing like that that's out there
Right.
for the progressive side that I know of. You
Yeah,
got,
once you get past, Soros, basically
yeah.
then, it gets really thin. There was a report that just came out, ooh, maybe last week or so, looking at the increasing role of billionaires in US elections. And and it listed, the billionaires, both the on the progressive side and on the on the right. And as you can imagine, it was mostly on the right.
Oh yeah.
So, there's just uh uh so Soros, he's there. He's kind of at the the top of the list, right? Because Soros is a money dude, and he's
Right.
been at it for a while. But then you get into people you basically kind of never heard of, but who are billionaires.
Yeah.
Uh, and the Koch brothers, they kind of on the list, but they're really kind of more towards the bottom of the list.
Which is surprising, but
There's
they
some,
are, yeah, because they're
yeah,
not on the
but
because I get Forbes magazine. I always want to read the Fortune 500,
oh, okay,
and the
right,
Forbes 500. And they're not on there. They're not on there in the top. It's amazing.
yeah. This report came from let me see, what was it? Tax Fairness, Americans for Tax Fairness.
Oh, I don't know that.
Uh, and so you can go on and download it, but it has a pretty detailed listing of what money these individuals and entities have thrown into this year's election. And again, you got George Soros. There's a guy named Steven Schwartzman, uh, Michael Bloomberg, but
Oh
pretty
my.
much everybody else is on the far right, or at least they're conservatives.
And in fact, to put Bloomberg in there as far as a progressive,
Right,
Bloomberg
right,
goes any,
yeah.
it's
So
like whatever
yeah,
whichever
right,
the wind, whichever
right.
the way the wind is blowing that moment, where he's going.
But
Yeah.
but it's also we focus a lot on the uh national campaigns for Congress and then for governors, but you also see at the local levels. So like
Yeah.
Los Angeles, there's a mayor's race, and the two candidates are Karen Bass. Karen
Oh,
Bass, grew up in L.A.,
right.
was a community organizer. She didn't start off as elected official. I was a community organizer, built one of the major community organizing groups in the city. Then she, ran and became the Speaker of the Assembly for California. And then after that, which was third in line after governor, second in line after governor, then came to Congress and had a very successful career. Became chair of the Congressional Black Caucus, and so last year, this year, she decided to run for mayor, and she had been leading all along, but her main candidate emerges as this billionaire guy,
Right.
Rick Caruso, who literally changes his affiliations to Democrat like a week before he has to file, and he spent somewhere between like 8 to 10 million. He spent 100 million on a mayor's race.
Oh
And
my God.
so he went from nowhere, literally nowhere, to virtual tie at this moment. And everybody in LA said they don't turn on their TV, they don't turn on the radio, they hate to go on, any social media because he is flooded everything.
My
When you got
goodness.
$100 million that you can throw into how right. So the surprise actually is that he's not running away with it, given the
Right.
disparity. But this is happening at the local level as well as we see on the national level.
Well, I'll tell you something you probably don't know about me. Some of my listeners do in the Denver area, but I ran for city council
You're a
in Denver.
billionaire?
Oh, yeah, I am too. That's why I'm here. I have
Okay.
property
Oh, okay,
everywhere.
okay,
No, I ran for
okay,
city council in Denver back in 2007.
okay.
And I had in my coffers, as far as money, at the most, probably about $12,000. But you could run for city council then. Now,
Right.
if you don't have like 2 million or more, forget it.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it's sad.
Yeah.
It's sad to realize that. But one thing before we go, because you
Yeah.
brought up that L.A. The mayoral race over there in L.A. One thing I've seen about that one, and the thing in Atlanta as far as the governorship, is that
Right.
there are parties that are bringing out black men and trying to say that they're not going to support this black woman, be it Bass or Stacey Abrams. And where is that
Right.
coming from?
Right.
What is this all of a sudden that, we're not going to support these women? What is that about? Have they been paid off or?
Oh yeah, well certainly some have, and the whole fact that Herschel Walker is even picked is trying to uh create a circumstance where it gives some conservative white voters this whole idea that they can't be racist and they can't be
Right. That's right.
bigoted because we're voting for this black man. So so the race politics in 2022 are really kind of gross tech. But there's a concerted push to go for black men, conservative black men, and on a get them around the issue of abortion, get them around the issue of crime, all of these kind of hot button issues that they believe black men more than black women would be willing to bend towards the conservative and Republican Party, and it may not be that far off. But the other side of it is that the Democrats also haven't paid that much attention to the interests of black men and black women as their distinct kind of
Right.
concerns. And so I see it with my students. A lot of my black male students are ambiguous about the Democrats. None of them are kind of MAGA, but they're not that far from, I can't really vote for Joe Biden because he ain't doing it for me, kind of
Right.
deal. And so the Democrats got to be very, very, very conscious of not taking for granted that they're going to get the black vote because this the racism and the bigotry and all of that so far out on the other side. And then, as we talked about earlier, I think there is, a strong strand of Christianity and even evangelism in the black community,
Right.
and that's being tapped into as well.
That's a shame. And it's a shame of your students, the ones you're talking to. Do you ever say to them like, "Oh, well, what about Kamala Harris? I mean, she's a sister here from Howard, graduate
From
here."
Howard.
Yeah.
Uh, so we're very conscious of not trying to impose our views on the
Right.
students. But we do want them to be informed, and uh, this is the thing I get is they get virtually all of their news from social media.
Yeah, that's a good
They're
deal.
not reading the Washington Post. They're not turning to MSNBC or CNN. And everything on there that's crazy comes across their thing. So they really have to be aware of all of the uh, fabrications that's targeted. So it's not accidentally coming across their social media. These, as the uh, structure of the social media platforms is very much about individual targeting.
That's
We
right.
used to say, when we were coming up, elections were about reaching as many people as you can with this broad message. Now it's reaching every individual you can
That's it.
because you know what their buying patterns are, what they have clicked that they like, what they think is stupid, where they got membership. You know everything about them, and that tells you this is the message to send to them.
That's
And
scary.
so, and it's all algorithms and it's all automated. So that's what I see my students, that what they're kind of struggling with is their sources of information in a period where you have more access to information than ever in
Yeah.
history.
Yeah.
What they're bombarded with is a alternative world.
That's it. And that's a shame. And do you ever, I know you can't really do it on one end, but do you kind of prod them to look at Democracy Now! Or Black Agenda Report or anything?
So we have broad readings, so I give them kind of everything to kind of look at,
Uh-huh.
and have them research. But this is still a struggle, and I think other professors will say, getting students to read as a habit, as a I just want to read because I want to know, and I'm going to read something serious. it's it's just still a big challenge.
Wow. At a university,
And
man.
at a university, and and at a university, that's the students are very very try they're coming to be educated, so you can imagine outside of the university then what information people are getting and such.
My
But
goodness.
this reason you have a radio show. This reason I give talks because we want to reach people.
Yeah. Hopefully, somebody, at least one person, will get what we're talking about today. And Clarence, you'll be back on here a number of times. Especially with the new book that's coming out. And I'll try to get. I want to get you on here after the holidays in January, and we'll talk offline about
Absolutely.
that. You know, and let's tell people real quickly the name of the book and the new book and what it's about.
The book is titled $20 in Change: Harriet Tubman and the Ongoing Struggle for Racial Justice and Democracy. And what I try to do in this book is to use the issue that arose of replacing Harriet Tubman on the front of the $20 bill and removing Andrew Jackson. Now the plan is to move him to the back of the bill, but there's efforts to try to stop that. But that opened up
I didn't know
a
that. Oh God, I didn't. They were gonna put him on the back. Oh
oh
God, I
yeah,
didn't know that
yeah.
one.
The plan is to put him on the back of the deal. So some of us that have been having discussions with people in the Treasury Department and the new U.S. Treasurer actually has Native American background. Right. So so that's a whole deal.
Right.
But my argument. So this opens the door to kind of revisit both Harriet Tubman and Andrew Jackson. And so my argument, one of my arguments is that Harriet Tubman was a Democrat. And by that, I mean small d
Right.
Democrat. And this is to recast her not as just someone who fought around racial justice, abolition of slavery, women's rights, voting rights, but when you add all of that together, she was really kind of the proponent of democracy in the most genuine kind of way,
That's right.
compared to Andrew Jackson, who not only was a slave owner, was a slave trader, and then was a leader and participant in Native American massacres.
Right.
So this guy has no rationale for being on any kind of honorific other than this is a narrative that has existed in the country of white supremacy and privileging and masking the reality of what has been the behavior of people who get glorified, and therefore and it's not a surprise that this was Donald Trump's favorite president.
That's right.
So I use that to then talk about how these issues that Harriet Tubman was dealing with her entire life manifest in our current politics. So she had a disability. She was struck in the head when she was a child, and it gave her some form of epilepsy or some other
Right.
kind of disease where she would black out. So black people's health is tied very much to what happened during slavery. So I have a chapter from 1619 to COVID-19. So when we talk about black people in COVID, it's not just about black people in COVID, it's about this history as well. And then
Yeah.
there's other chapters on George Floyd and the uprisings and the movement to change symbols and voting rights.
I can't wait to get you back on here to talk to you about that book. And I got to ask you one other thing about Harriet Tubman. I just saw this week.
Right.
Are you aware of what the CIA is doing with her?
The CIA.
They have put up a
Uh,
statue at the headquarters in Langley, and they're using her in
okay.
some of their campaigns as a recruitment thing, saying that Harriet Tubman was a spy, and therefore you should consider as a black person becoming a spy with us.
Well, she was a spy, but not
Yeah,
for the CIA.
I
The
know,
CIA even exists,
but they're using it. Oh,
and she was aspiring to end slavery. So
Yeah,
that's
but
what we're talking about, not
yeah, but they're using
whatever
go
this is.
check it out at Langley. I mean, it's something. They got a statue up.
I will have to see, man. I will have to check this out.
Oh man,
Yes.
but Clarence, we can go on all day. But tell my listeners how they can reach you. They want to talk to you some more.
So you can always find me at Howard University. You can just do a search on Howard University Political Science Department, and you'll see my contact information.
All right. Thank you so much, Clarence, for coming on. I'll have you back on and
Of
stand
course.
by. Yeah, oh, definitely. Gotta make you a regular person on the show. But anyway, thank you so much. You take care. I'll talk to you
Well,
offline
my best
in a
to
second.
you and your lovely wife.
All right. I'll talk to you
All
in
right.
a few minutes. Okay.
All right.
And that's my buddy there, Clarence. I really enjoyed talking to him, and I hope you enjoyed that interview. And we're going to have him back on again. And what I'm going to do right now in the final minutes of the show, I'm going to play a song that's kind of apropos. It's a classic, but I'm not going to do the Marvin Gaye version, although Marvin Gaye is on this version. But I'm going to do Angela Winbush, her interpretation of Inner City Blues. So let's hear that right now on the Root and Root Show.
This ain't living, no, no, no.
That is the one and only Angela Winbush in her version of Inner City Blues that you heard in the background. They took the sample of Marvin Gaye's original Inner City Blues. They both, I like both of them, obviously, but Angela's my girl. I gotta say that. I just was happy when she put out her version believe it or not, back in the late 80s. That's another story there. But anyway, hope you enjoyed the interview today with Clarence Lucien on the Root and Root Show, and we're going to have him on again to talk about his new book about Harriet Tubman and talk about other issues too. And as I always say, if you have someone that you'd like me to interview or some music you want me to play, just give me a shout on Facebook. Look for Gregory, last name Rasheed, Rasheed, and just put your interest on there, because a lot of people do that, and I'm very happy to hear from folks all over the world, be it here in Thailand, in the U.S., be it somewhere in Sweden, a little bit of everywhere, in Brazil. It's just amazing. But we're going to get out of here right now. But as we always say, go in love and go in peace and know yourself. Because you can't do anything in this world if you don't know yourself. You can't help anybody if you don't know yourself. You can't do anything. So know yourself and go in love and go in peace. Help a senior along the way. Help a young person in your neighborhood, because we're all in this together. Even though they say, the pandemic is over, there's still things going on. I got a friend who just got COVID just today. So things are still going on. So be careful out there, but go in love and go in peace. And we will see you next time on the Root and Root Show. Take care.
Thanks for tuning in. See you next time. And remember, spread the knowledge, share the power.